I was sitting in an interrogation room at the Denver Police Department, staring at a detective who kept asking me the same question. Why did you steal your own car? The absurdity of it would have been funny if my heart was not breaking into pieces. My parents, the two people who brought me into this world, had filed a police report claiming I had stolen my Honda Accord, the car I bought with my own money, the car I worked 3 years to afford. They wanted me to take the fall for my brother Kyle, and they were willing to destroy me to save him. Before we go further, I want to know where you are watching this from. Drop a comment below and let me know your thoughts. Hit that like button and subscribe if you want to hear more real stories about family betrayal and finding strength when everything falls apart. Because what happened next changed everything I thought I knew about loyalty. Let me take you back to understand how I ended up in that cold room with fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. My name is Norman, and I am 28 years old. I work as an IT technician in Denver, Colorado. I have always been the responsible one, the kid who did his homework without being asked, who got a part-time job at 16 to help with expenses, who moved out at 18 because I wanted to stand on my own 2 feet. My family consists of my father Frank, who is 56, and worked in construction most of his life. My mother Linda is 54 and stayed home to raise us. Then there is Kyle, my younger brother. He is 24, and from the day he was born, the rules seemed different for him. When Kyle forgot his homework, Mom would drive it to school. When Kyle wrecked Dad's truck at 19, they bought him another car within a month. When Kyle got fired from jobs for showing up late or not showing up at all, they would say he was just finding himself. I bought my first house when I was 26. It is nothing fancy, just a small 2-bedroom ranch in a decent neighborhood, but it is mine. I furnished it myself, painted the walls on weekends, planted flowers in the front yard. Every piece of furniture, every dish in the cabinet, I earned it. That sense of accomplishment of building something with your own hands and your own money, it meant everything to me. 2 years after buying the house, I finally saved enough to get the car I had been dreaming about. A Honda Accord 2019 model, dark blue with gray interior. I remember the day I drove it off the lot. My hands were shaking on the steering wheel, not from nerves, but from pure joy. This was not just a car. This was proof that hard work pays off, that I could set a goal and reach it without anyone's help. Kyle asked to borrow it the first week I had it. We were at a family dinner, and he just assumed I would hand over the keys like it was nothing. When I said no, his face turned red. But Norman, I just need it for a date. I have a girl I am trying to impress. I explained that I had worked hard for this car and I was not comfortable lending it out yet. He stormed away from the table. Mom followed him outside, and when she came back, her eyes were cold. You could have just let him borrow it for one night. He is your brother. That was the pattern. Kyle would want something, I would set a boundary, and somehow I would end up being the villain. It got worse when I found out Kyle had gotten a DUI 2 years earlier. Dad had paid for a lawyer to get the charge reduced, and they never told me. I only discovered it when Kyle casually mentioned it during another argument about the car. He thought it was funny, like it was just a silly mistake anyone could make. But I knew what it meant. It meant my brother had endangered lives, and my parents had swept it under the rug like it was nothing. The tension came to a head on a Friday night in October. I had stopped by my parents' house for dinner, something I did less and less frequently, because every visit turned into a guilt trip about not being close enough to Kyle. That night, Kyle was already there, sprawled on the couch watching football. I could smell beer from across the room. He had gone through at least a 6-pack, judging by the empties on the coffee table. About an hour into the evening, Kyle stood up and asked for my car keys. He said his girlfriend was at a bar downtown and needed a ride home. I looked at him, at his glassy eyes and unsteady stance, and said, "Absolutely not. You have been drinking." The room went silent. Then Kyle exploded. He started yelling about how I always thought I was better than him, how I rubbed my success in his face, how I was a terrible brother. I stayed calm and repeated, that I would not give my keys to someone who had been drinking. Dad stepped in, but not the way I hoped. "Norman, it is just a few beers. Kyle can handle it. He is not drunk." I could not believe what I was hearing. Mom joined in, saying I was being unreasonable, that family helps family. The argument escalated until I grabbed my jacket and left. As I walked to my car, I heard Kyle shouting from the doorway, "You are going to regret this." I drove home feeling hollowed out. This was not the first time I had been made to feel like the problem for having standards, but something about that night felt different, heavier. I went to bed around midnight trying to shake off the sick feeling in my stomach. The phone woke me up at 7:30 on Saturday morning. I fumbled for it, still half asleep, and saw it was a Denver Police Department number. My first thought was that something had happened to someone in my family. The officer on the line was polite but firm. "Mr. Norman, we need you to come down to the station. Your vehicle was involved in a hit-and-run incident last night." My brain struggled to process his words. My vehicle, I got out of bed and walked to my garage. The spot where I parked my Accord was empty. My heart started pounding. I asked the officer for details. He told me my car had crashed into a convenience store on Colfax Avenue around 2 in the morning. The driver had fled the scene. There was significant damage to the storefront, and the owner was pressing charges. I threw on clothes and drove my old pickup truck to my parents' house. It was 8 in the morning when I pounded on their door. Dad answered, looking surprised but not shocked. "Where is Kyle?" I demanded. Dad hesitated, then said Kyle was sleeping upstairs. I pushed past him and ran up to Kyle's old bedroom. He was in bed, fully clothed, reeking of alcohol. I shook him awake. "Where is my car?" He mumbled something incoherent and rolled over. I checked the driveway, the street, the garage. No sign of my Accord. Mom appeared in the doorway, wringing her hands. "Norman, we need to talk." But before she could say more, my phone rang again. It was the police asking me to come to the station immediately. I left without another word, my mind spinning with possibilities, none of them good. At the station, I was led into a small room with a metal table and uncomfortable chairs. Detective Ramirez sat across from me with a folder in his hands. "Mr. Norman, we have a complicated situation here. Your parents filed a report this morning claiming you stole your vehicle from their property last night." I stared at him, certain I had misheard. "I am sorry," what he repeated it slowly. "Your parents, Frank and Linda, filed a stolen vehicle report at 6 this morning. They claim the Honda Accord belongs to your brother Kyle, but is registered in your name for insurance purposes. They say you took it without permission last night." The room started to spin. I felt like I was in a nightmare where nothing made sense. I pulled out my phone and showed the detective my registration, my insurance documents, my loan payment history. "This is my car. I have been making payments on it for 2 years. I bought it myself." The detective nodded, looking at the documents carefully. "I see that. But your parents are insisting otherwise. They have filed an official complaint. I asked to see the accident report. The detective showed me photos of the damage. My beautiful car had plowed through the front window of a convenience store. Glass everywhere, the hood crumpled, airbags deployed. The owner had security footage, and when the detective showed it to me, there was no question who was driving. Kyle. I could see his face clearly in the video, stumbling out of my car and running down the street. "I need to call my parents." The detective nodded and left me alone in the room. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely dial. Dad answered on the 3rd ring. His voice was tight, controlled. "Norman, listen to me carefully. Kyle is in serious trouble. He owes money to some very dangerous people. If he goes to prison for this, they will kill him. You are strong, you can handle yourself in there. You have to take the fall for this." I felt like I had been punched in the stomach. "You want me to go to prison for him?" Dad sighed, like I was being difficult about something minor. "You are his brother. Family protects family. You have a good job, a clean record. They will go easier on you than on Kyle. He already has that DUI. This would be his third strike. He is looking at 5 years minimum. I could not breathe. And what about me? What about my life, my job, my future? Dad's voice hardened. Kyle is your brother. This is what brothers do. Mom got on the line crying. Please, Norman, I am begging you. He is my baby. I cannot lose him. If you love us, if you love your brother, you will do this. You are the strong one. You always have been. I hung up without answering. My whole body was numb. Over the next 3 days, my phone never stopped ringing. Mom called every few hours, alternating between crying and angry accusations. If you let your brother go to prison, I will never forgive you. You are killing this family. Dad sent text messages. We raised you better than this. How can you be so selfish? Aunts and uncles I had not heard from in years suddenly had opinions. Your parents are beside themselves. How can you do this to them? Cousins I barely knew sent messages calling me heartless, cruel, a disgrace to the family. I felt like I was drowning. Every time my phone buzzed, my chest tightened. I stopped sleeping. I stopped eating. I would sit in my house in the home I had worked so hard for and feel completely alone. My entire family had turned against me because I refused to sacrifice my freedom for Kyle's mistakes. The worst part was not the anger. It was the assumption that my life mattered less than his, that my future was acceptable collateral damage. On the 4th day, I called a lawyer. Her name was Patricia Hendricks, and she had a reputation for being tough and thorough. I sat in her office and told her everything. She listened without interrupting, taking notes in a leather-bound notebook. When I finished, she looked at me with something like sadness in her eyes. Norman, I need you to understand something. Your parents are not just asking you to lie. They are actively trying to frame you for a crime. That is conspiracy. That is witness tampering. If we pursue this, there will be consequences for them too. I told her to do whatever it took. I was done protecting people who saw me as expendable. Patricia got to work immediately. She subpoenaed the security footage from the convenience store. She pulled Kyle's driving record, which turned out to be worse than I knew. In addition to the DUI, he had 2 accidents where he had fled the scene. Both times my parents had paid the victims directly to avoid police involvement. They had used the equity in their vacation cabin to cover the costs. They were financially ruined because of Kyle, and now they wanted to ruin me too. Patricia also obtained Kyle's medical records from the night of the accident. He had gone to an emergency room the next morning, claiming he had fallen downstairs. His blood alcohol content was still 0.15, nearly twice the legal limit 14 hours after the accident. The evidence was overwhelming. But the most damaging piece came from a conversation I had with Dad 3 days after the accident. I had recorded it. In Colorado, you only need one party's consent to record a conversation, and I was that party. In the recording, Dad's voice was clear. We have to do this, Norman. We have no choice. You have to say you took the car. You have to say you were driving. Kyle cannot go back to prison. They will kill him in there. The people he owes money to have connections everywhere. I am asking you as your father. No, I am telling you as your father. You will do this for your brother. The desperation in his voice was painful to hear, but so was the absolute certainty that my life was worth less than Kyle's comfort. Patricia filed motions with the court. She requested a formal hearing to address the conflicting claims about the vehicle ownership. The hearing was set for 3 weeks later, and those were the longest weeks of my life. I went to work every day, sat at my desk, fixed computers, and pretended everything was normal. But at night, I would lie awake, imagining what my parents' faces would look like when they realized I was not backing down. The morning of the hearing, I put on my only suit, a navy blue one I had bought for job interviews. I looked at myself in the mirror and barely recognized the person staring back. I had lost weight. There were dark circles under my eyes, but there was something else too, a hardness that had not been there before. I had always been the good son, the responsible one, the peacekeeper. That person was gone. The courtroom was smaller than I expected. Patricia sat beside me at one table. Across the aisle, Kyle sat with a public defender. Behind him, Mom and Dad sat in the gallery, both looking older than I remembered. Mom would not meet my eyes. Dad stared at me with something between anger and pleading. The judge, a woman in her 60s with sharp eyes and silver hair, reviewed the documents in front of her. She asked the basic questions. Who purchased the vehicle? I did, Your Honor. I have the loan documents and payment history. Who is listed on the registration? I am, Your Honor. Who has been making the insurance payments? I have, Your Honor. Every month for 2 years. Then she turned to my parents. Mr. and Mrs. Norman, you filed a police report claiming this vehicle was stolen. Can you provide any documentation showing that you or your son Kyle have any legal claim to this vehicle? Dad stood up, his construction worker hands clasped in front of him. Your Honor, we gave Kyle the money to buy the car. We just put it in Norman's name because Kyle had credit problems. But it was always meant to be Kyle's car. Patricia stood smoothly. Your Honor, I have bank statements showing that Norman took out an auto loan in his own name. No money from Frank or Linda appears in any of Norman's accounts. She handed copies to the judge. Furthermore, I have records showing that Kyle has not made a single payment toward this vehicle. She submitted more documents. The judge studied them, her expression unreadable. Then Patricia played her final card. Your Honor, I also have a recording of a conversation between Norman and his father Frank. In this recording, Frank explicitly acknowledges that Norman owns the car and asks Norman to falsely confess to a crime Kyle committed. She set up a small speaker, and Dad's voice filled the courtroom. We have to do this, Norman. We have no choice. You have to say you took the car. You have to say you were driving. Mom gasped. Dad's face went white. Kyle slumped in his chair. The judge raised her hand for silence, and the room obeyed. She looked at Dad with cold fury. Sir, are you aware that asking someone to confess to a crime they did not commit is itself a crime? That filing a false police report is a crime? That conspiracy to obstruct justice is a crime? Dad's mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. The judge turned to Patricia. Do you have the security footage from the convenience store? Patricia nodded and submitted a USB drive. The judge watched the footage on her computer, and I saw her jaw tighten. When she looked up, her gaze moved to Kyle. Young man, that is clearly you driving that vehicle into a storefront and fleeing the scene. Do you deny it? Kyle looked at his public defender, who whispered something to him. Then Kyle spoke, his voice barely audible. No, Your Honor. I do not deny it. It was me. I am sorry. I am so sorry. He started crying, and I felt a strange mix of pity and rage. He was sorry now, but he had been willing to let me go to prison. They all had been. The judge made her ruling swiftly. Kyle was arrested in the courtroom for hit and run, driving under the influence, and leaving the scene of an accident. Because of his prior record, bail was set at $50,000. Dad was also arrested, led out in handcuffs, charged with filing a false police report, conspiracy to obstruct justice, and witness tampering. Mom was not charged, but she sat in the gallery sobbing into her hands, suddenly alone. As the bailiffs led Kyle and Dad away, Kyle looked back at me. His eyes were red, his face blotchy from crying. I am sorry, Norman. I am so sorry. I just nodded. Sorry did not undo the betrayal. Sorry did not give me back the weeks of anguish, the sleepless nights, the feeling of being utterly abandoned by the people who were supposed to love me most. Outside the courtroom, Mom tried to approach me. Patricia stepped between us. Mrs. Norman, I advise you not to speak to my client. Mom looked at me over Patricia's shoulder. Norman, please. They are going to prison, your brother and your father. Please, you have to do something. I met her eyes, and for the first time in my life, I did not feel guilty. I did not feel responsible for fixing this. I did the only thing I could. Mom, I told the truth. Kyle was sentenced to 3 years in state prison. His lawyer tried to argue for rehab instead, but the judge was unmoved. This was not his first offense, not even his second. He had shown a pattern of reckless behavior and a refusal to accept responsibility. 3 years. Dad got 18 months for his role in trying to frame me. The judge said she was being lenient because he had no prior record, but she made it clear that his actions were reprehensible. 18 months. 6 months have passed since that day in court. I have not spoken to my parents. Mom calls sometimes and I see her number on my screen, but I do not answer. She leaves voicemails asking me to visit Dad in prison, telling me that Kyle is struggling, begging me to forgive them. I delete them without listening all the way through. Maybe that makes me cruel. Maybe I will regret it someday. But right now, I need distance. I need to heal. The first few months were the hardest. Holidays were brutal. Thanksgiving, I sat alone in my house with a frozen dinner, listening to the silence. Christmas was worse. I drove past houses decorated with lights, families visible through windows laughing and opening presents. I felt like a ghost watching life happen to other people. But slowly, things started to shift. I threw myself into work. I took on extra projects, volunteered to help train new employees, stayed late to organize the server room. My boss noticed and gave me a raise. It was not about the money. It was about proving to myself that I had value, that I was more than the family scapegoat. I started going to the gym before work, something I had always meant to do, but never found time for. The physical exhaustion helped quiet my mind. I joined a hiking group through a community center. Every Saturday, we would drive up into the Rockies and spend the day on the trails. There was something healing about being in nature, about the simplicity of putting one foot in front of the other, about reaching a summit and seeing the world spread out below. The people in the group were kind. They asked about my life, but they did not push when I kept my answers vague. They just accepted me as I was. One of them, a woman named Sarah, became a real friend. She was a few years older than me, a teacher with a quiet strength and a habit of saying exactly what she meant. We started getting coffee after hikes, and eventually I told her the whole story. She listened without judgment, and when I finished, she said something that stuck with me. "You did not break your family, Norman. You just stopped pretending it was not already broken. That was not your job to fix. I still see my car every day. The insurance covered most of the repairs, but there is a small dent in the front bumper that the body shop could not quite smooth out. Sometimes I run my hand over it, feeling the imperfection under my fingers. It reminds me of what I survived, what I chose, what I refused to accept. It is not perfect, but it is mine, just like my life. I do not hate my parents. I do not even hate Kyle. But I also do not forgive what they did. Maybe forgiveness will come someday, or maybe it will not. I have learned that you can love people and still recognize that they are bad for you. You can wish them well from a distance. You can hope they find peace without needing to be part of their journey. The hardest lesson was this: sacrifice is not love when it only goes one direction. Real love does not ask you to destroy yourself to save someone else. Real love does not weaponize guilt. Real love does not say, "If you loved me, you would let me hurt you." I spent my whole life thinking that being a good son and a good brother meant endless giving, endless understanding, endless second chances. But boundaries are not betrayal. Protecting yourself is not selfishness. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is let people face the consequences of their choices. I am building a new life now. It is smaller in some ways. I do not have big family dinners or chaotic holiday gatherings, but it is also bigger because it is honest. The people in my life now, the friends I am making, they value me for who I am, not for what I can do for them. They do not ask me to be less so they can feel like more. That is worth more than any blood relation. If someone had told me a year ago that I would be here in this place of hard-won peace, I would not have believed them. The pain was too sharp, the betrayal too deep. but pain has a way of transforming you if you let it. You can let it make you bitter, or you can let it make you stronger. I chose stronger. Every day I keep choosing it. So here is what I want you to take away from my story. When people show you who they are, believe them. When they tell you that their comfort matters more than your well-being, listen. And when you realize that the people who should protect you are the ones hurting you, give yourself permission to walk away. It will be hard. It will hurt. But on the other side of that pain is freedom. The freedom to be yourself without apology. The freedom to set standards and hold them. The freedom to say I deserve better and mean it. I look at my life now and I see possibility. I see mornings where I wake up without dread. I see friendships built on mutual respect. I see a future that belongs to me, shaped by my choices, not by someone else's dysfunction. That is not nothing. That is everything. The truth came out and it set me free. Not in some poetic, easy way. Freedom is messy and complicated and sometimes lonely, but it is also real. And after a lifetime of pretending, real is exactly what I needed. What do you think? Have you ever had to set boundaries with family that others did not understand? Drop a comment below and share your experience. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real talk about the complicated parts of life we do not always discuss. Share this with someone who might need to hear it. Thank you for listening to my story, and I hope it helps you find the courage to protect your own peace, whatever that looks like for you. Take care of yourself out there. You deserve it.